"Bring the maid tonight. I want to see her try to pass herself off as a lady." Charles Thornton's voice echoed through the saloon like a whip, drawing laughter from the men around the card table. He raised his glass of whiskey, his eyes gleaming with calculated cruelty, and everyone there knew that night someone was going to be torn apart before the elite of Silver Ridge. What no one imagined was that the maid he had targeted to humiliate held a secret capable of shaking everything they knew about power, honor, and revenge. A story that began long before she washed glasses in that filthy saloon. A story that was about to explode. It was 1882 in the heart of Arizona, where the Thornton Railroad cut through the desert like an iron snake, crushing small farmers and swallowing up land. Charles Thornton owned everything. The tracks, the bank, the cattle that roamed the plains. A man who bought judges, silenced sheriffs, and decided who ate and who went hungry. And when he wanted fun, he chose a victim. This time, the victim had a name, Eleanor Morgan. She had worked at the Silver Star Saloon for 6 months. No one knew where she came from. No one asked. She was just another lost soul trying to survive in the shadows of the West. Her brown hair was always tied back, her hands calloused from scrubbing tables. Her eyes seemed to hold silent storms. She served drinks, cleaned up vomit, endured rough handling and obscene jokes. She never reacted. She never spoke more than necessary. And that's precisely what sparked Thornton's perverse curiosity. He saw her one night, serving whiskey without raising her eyes, and decided she would be perfect for his next entertainment. Thornton loved doing this, taking someone humble, promising them a moment of glory, and then publicly crushing them. He'd done it to a street vendor, an itinerant preacher, even an ex-soldier who dared to ask for a job. Watching ordinary people try to fit in with the elite and fail miserably was to him better than any variety show. "We're going to have a party at my ranch," he announced that afternoon, before his henchmen and the merchants who fawned over him. "And I want you to invite that saloon maid. Tell her it's an opportunity to meet important people. Have her wear her best dress." He gave a husky laugh. "I want to see her tripping over silk skirts, trying to hold a wine glass like a real lady." The men laughed together. It was the kind of casual cruelty that defined power in the West, humiliating the weak simply because they could. What Charles Thornton didn't know was that Eleanor Morgan had already set foot in far more refined salons than his, that she had already worn dresses tailored by Boston seamstresses, that she had already dined with real senators and judges, not the puppets he bought with dirty money. What he didn't know was that Eleanor Morgan was the daughter of one of the most powerful men on the East Coast, a man Thornton had destroyed years before, stealing contracts, sabotaging deals, pushing the Morgan family to ruin. Eleanor had lost everything. Father dead of heartbreak, mother institutionalized in a sanatorium, fortune evaporated, and she had sworn one thing: to find the man responsible and make him pay. And now, he himself had just opened the door. When Eleanor received the invitation, delivered by a grinning henchman who could barely disguise his disdain, she didn't feel fear. She felt something cold and sharp running down her spine. Finally, she ran her fingers over the expensive invitation and smiled for the first time in months, a smile no one in the saloon had ever seen before, a smile that promised a storm. Because Charles Thornton was about to discover that some maids don't fall to the ground when you push them. Some get back up, and some know exactly how to use a man's arrogance against him. The party was in 3 days, and when Eleanor Morgan walked through that door, the Old West would never be the same again. Eleanor woke up at 5 in the morning every day. The sun hadn't even crept above the Arizona horizon when she was already up, lighting the kerosene lamp in the small back room of the Silver Star Saloon. A room that looked more like a storage room, a narrow bed, an old trunk, a cracked basin for washing her face. The thin walls let in the chill of the early morning and the moans of the prostitutes in the next room, tired from a long night. She wore the same grey dress as always, patched at the elbows, stained with grease and wine. She tied her hair in a tight bun, washed her face with cold water, and went downstairs to start her day. No one greeted her. No one asked how she had slept. She was part of the furniture, like the scratched wooden tables and the crooked chairs. The first task was to sweep the sawdust from the floor, that brown sawdust that covered the saloon floor, soaked with tobacco spit, spilled whiskey, sour beer, and sometimes blood from some fight the night before. Eleanor would take the heavy broom and push all that mess out through the double doors that led to the dirt road of Silver Ridge. The smell of rancid alcohol clung to her clothes, her skin, her hair. No matter how many times I washed my hands, the smell never went away. Then it was time to wash the glasses. Hundreds of dirty glasses piled behind the counter, some still with traces of drink at the bottom, others with marks of cheap lipstick or greasy fingers. She scrubbed them one by one, plunging her hands into ice-cold water mixed with thick soap that stung the cuts and calluses on her palms. Her fingers, which once held lace fans and piano sheet music, were now rough, swollen, and always aching. The saloon owner, a fat man named Butch, would walk around yelling orders. "Eleanor, these tables aren't going to clean themselves, and watch out for Judge Parker's glass. He complains about everything." She would lower her head and obey. There was no room for a response, no room for dignity. Anyone who complained was fired on the spot, and being fired meant the street. It meant hunger. It meant perhaps something even worse. She cleaned the tables stained with cards, collected forgotten coins, coins she never dared keep because Butch counted everything and deducted from her wages if a penny was missing. She washed the floor again at the end of the afternoon before the night bustle began. She carried heavy buckets of water to the kitchen. She washed the prostitutes' sheets in a tub in the back, scrubbing until her arms trembled, and when night fell, she served drinks. She walked between the tables with a tray, dodging hands that tried to grab her waist, fingers that tugged at her skirt, drunken voices making obscene jokes. She smiled little, spoke even less. She had learned that any reaction, anger, disgust, fear, only made things worse. So she became invisible, a shadow that passed, filled glasses, and vanished. But inside, Eleanor Morgan was burning. She remembered who she had been. She remembered the silk dresses her mother had made in Boston. She remembered the balls where she danced waltzes under crystal chandeliers. She remembered her father laughing, strong, confident, saying that she would never need to worry about anything, that he would take care of everything. She remembered the library full of books, the French lessons, the afternoon teas with other young women from high society, and he remembered the day everything fell apart. She remembered her father coming home with a grey face, saying they had lost everything, that a man named Charles Thornton had sabotaged their company's contracts, bribed politicians, spread lies, and destroyed the family's reputation. She remembered her mother crying, the furniture being sold one by one, the house being seized by the bank. She remembered her father dying of heartbreak, his heart stopping in the middle of the night. She remembered her mother losing her mind, being taken to a sanatorium where she would remain until she died, and Eleanor had survived, barely, alone, penniless, friendless, nameless. She had fled west because it was the only place where no one asked where you came from, where you could be nobody, and that was enough. But she never forgot the name of the man who had stolen everything from her, Charles Thornton. And now, 6 months after arriving in Silver Ridge, working in that miserable saloon, sleeping in that mold-smelling room, she discovered that he was there, in the same town, owner of half of Arizona, rich, powerful, untouchable. She had spent months planning, observing, waiting. She knew that confronting him directly would be useless. Men like Thornton crushed insects like her without batting an eye. She needed another strategy. She needed time. She needed an opening. Then, one Friday afternoon, one of Thornton's henchmen walked into the saloon. He was tall, dirty, with a crooked smile that showed yellowed teeth. He stopped in front of Eleanor while she was cleaning a table and pulled an envelope from his pocket. "You've been invited to a party at Mr. Thornton's ranch," he said, his voice thick and sarcastic. "Saturday night. Wear your best dress." He gave a dry laugh. "If you even have one." Eleanor's stomach turned. She picked up the envelope, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't let anything show on her face. She opened it. She read, a formal invitation, printed on expensive paper, with her name scribbled by hand. Eleanor Morgan, attendance requested. She looked up at the henchman who was still laughing and said simply, "Thank Mr. Thornton, I'll be there." The man shrugged and left, still laughing. He had no idea what he had just done. Because Eleanor Morgan wasn't afraid. She had waited for this, prayed for this. And now finally, Charles Thornton had opened the door to her own ruin. That same night, in the luxurious office of the Thornton Ranch, the light of an oil lamp danced on the leather-lined walls. Charles Thornton poured imported whiskey into 2 crystal glasses and handed one to his manager, a middle-aged man named Frank Sullivan, who ran the saloon and several other businesses of the tycoon in Silver Ridge. "Frank, my friend," said Thornton, leaning back in his red velvet armchair, "did you give the invitation to the maid?" Frank gave a crooked smile. "I delivered it, sir. She accepted it. She even thanked me." He let out a short laugh. As if it were a real honor, Thornton raised his glass, observing the amber liquid against the light. Perfect. You know the plan, right? I want it to be memorable. He took a slow sip, savoring it. These people need to understand their place. There's no point in giving opportunities to people like that. They'll always want more than they deserve. Frank nodded in agreement. And what's the plan? I just want to make sure everything goes as you envision. Thornton leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a cold, calculated cruelty. Simple. I'll have her brought by carriage. That'll get the whole town talking. She'll arrive at the ranch thinking she'll be treated like a guest. I'll greet her politely at first, introduce her to a few people, pretend I'm being generous. He paused, his smile widening. And then, at dinner time, when everyone's seated at the table, I'll put her in her place. Like this. I'll have her serve the food. In front of everyone. Thornton gave a dry laugh. After all, that's what she does, isn't it? Serves drinks, cleans tables. Why would it be any different in my house? He slammed his hand on the mahogany table. I want to see her face when she realizes she's been brought in for entertainment, and I want everyone to see it. The merchants, the farmers, the judge, the sheriff. Everyone will laugh. And she'll learn that no matter what she wears or how she tries to behave, a maid will always be a maid. Frank took a sip of whiskey, lost in thought. What if she reacts? What if she runs away or makes a scene? Even better, Thornton replied, his eyes cold as stone. Then I'll fire her from the saloon on the spot, and I guarantee no one in Silver Ridge will hire her. She'll end up on the street, or worse. He leaned back again, satisfied. It's a matter of control, Frank. These people need to know who's in charge. If I let a maid think she can sit at my table, tomorrow the farmhands will want to use my house as a boarding house. Frank laughed, raising his glass in a silent toast. You always know how to keep order. Meanwhile, in the cramped back room of the saloon, Eleanor sat on the edge of the narrow bed, clutching the invitation in her hands. The dim lamplight flickered, casting long shadows on the peeling walls. She knew exactly what it was. It wasn't an invitation. It was a trap. Thornton had no kindness in his heart. He wanted to humiliate her, use her as an example, make the Silver Ridge elite laugh at her expense. She could feel the anger rising in her throat, hot and bitter. She could picture the scene, her stumbling over a borrowed dress, struggling to hold a wine glass, while wealthy men made jokes about her calloused hands and dirty fingernails. She could hear the laughter echoing in the luxurious hall of the Thornton Ranch. She could see the scornful glances. She could feel the shame burning her cheeks. But Eleanor Morgan did not cry. She folded the invitation slowly, carefully, and placed it inside the old trunk beside the bed. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and made a decision. She was going to accept Thornton's game. She was going to enter that ranch. She was going to let him think he had won. Because men like Charles Thornton always made the same mistake. They thought power meant intelligence. They thought money shielded them from consequences. They thought no one would dare fight back. But Eleanor had something Thornton could never have imagined. She had information. She had a memory. She had hidden documents that proved everything he had done to her family, forged contracts, recorded bribes, witnesses who were still alive. She had spent 6 months piecing things together, talking to the right people, waiting for the right moment. And now, he himself had created this moment. Eleanor opened her eyes. The fear was still there, tightening in her chest. But along with it, something stronger. A courage born of pain, of loss, of the promise she had made at her father's grave. You will pay, Charles Thornton, she whispered into the silence of the room, for every tear. For every night my mother spent locked up in that sanatorium. For everything. She was going to go into that ranch. She was going to make him laugh. And then, when he least expected it, she was going to turn the tables. Eleanor spent the entire Saturday getting ready. She didn't have much to work with. The only dress that wasn't her saloon uniform was a faded navy blue dress she wore on Sundays when she went for walks alone in the hills outside town. She spent the afternoon washing, ironing, and mending a tear in the hem. It was nothing compared to the dresses she wore in Boston, but it would have to do. While I was working, the memories came as they always did, uninvited, mercilessly. Eleanor Morgan wasn't born poor. She wasn't born invisible. She was born in a 3-story mansion in the heart of Boston, the only daughter of William Morgan, one of the most influential men on the East Coast. He owned a railroad company that moved goods from Massachusetts to New York, contracts with the government, partnerships with banks, influence in Washington. Eleanor grew up surrounded by balls, piano lessons, and French governesses. She learned to speak 3 languages, to embroider, and to waltz without stumbling. Her mother, Catherine, was an elegant woman who organized charity teas and dinners where senators discussed politics while their wives talked about Parisian fashion. Eleanor was their pride and joy, beautiful, educated, destined to marry some heir from a traditional family and maintain the Morgan legacy for another generation. But then came Charles Thornton. He had appeared out of nowhere, coming from the West with dirty money and boundless ambition. He wanted to expand his business to the East Coast. He wanted contracts that already belonged to Eleanor's father. William Morgan, too naive to perceive the threat, tried to negotiate honestly. He offered fair partnerships, shared contracts. Thornton didn't want a partnership, he wanted everything. He started slowly, spreading rumors about the Morgan Company, bribing inspectors to find irregularities in the railroads, paying journalists to publish fabricated scandals. Then came the final blow, forged documents that made it seem as if William Morgan was embezzling government funds, cancelled contracts, lawsuits, bankruptcy. In 6 months, the Morgan family lost everything. William died of a broken heart, literally. The doctor said it was a heart attack, but Eleanor knew the truth. Her father died of shame, of heartbreak, of seeing everything he had built destroyed by an unscrupulous man. Catherine Morgan went mad. She stopped eating, sleeping, and talking. She began screaming in the middle of the night, tearing out her own hair. She was committed to a sanatorium where she would spend the rest of her life staring into the void. And Eleanor was left alone. No money, no family, no friends, because when you fall, nobody wants to be seen near you. She ran away. She took what little she had left and went west, where no one knew the name Morgan, where she could disappear. And she did disappear. She became Eleanor, the maid, Eleanor, the invisible one, Eleanor to no one. But now, as she ironed that navy blue dress, she felt something different. A transformation was taking place. Not on the outside. She was still the same thin woman with calloused hands and dull hair, but inside something was realigning. The victim mentality was giving way to something else. Determination, coldness, purpose. She opened the old trunk and rummaged through the bottom, beneath the torn sheets and rags. She was looking for something specific, something she had kept all these months, waiting for the right moment. And then he found it. It was a yellowed envelope, protected by a waxed cloth. Inside, a photograph. Eleanor held it up to the lamplight, her heart pounding. In the photo, she was 17, dressed in a white lace dress, next to her father in front of the Morgan mansion. She was smiling, a genuine, free, happy smile. Her father had his hand on her shoulder, proud. Below the photo, a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Morgan family announces partnership with federal government for rail expansion." And right below, another headline from months later, "Morgan scandal, fraud or persecution." And there was more. Letters, documents, proof that Thornton had forged everything. Testimony from employees he had bribed, receipts for illegal payments. Eleanor had obtained this through a lawyer who still owed favors to her father, an honest man who risked his own career to gather evidence. Eleanor kept everything back. It was proof of who she had been, and the weapon of what she would become. Eleanor put the documents back in the trunk and continued searching. There was something else she needed, something small but significant, something Thornton might recognize or might not. Either way, it would be a silent reminder of who she truly was. At the bottom of the waxed envelope, her fingers touched something cold and metallic. She pulled it out slowly. It was a small, delicate pearl and white gold brooch in the shape of a rose. It had been a gift from Eleanor's paternal grandmother, passed down through generations of the Morgan women. Her mother had given it to her on her 16th birthday during a ball in Boston. Eleanor held the brooch up to the light. The pearls still sparkled, intact despite everything. She remembered the ball, the lights, the music, the elegant men inviting her to dance, the women complimenting her dress. She remembered her father watching from afar, his chest puffed out with pride. She remembered feeling invincible, protected, loved, and he remembered the day when everything fell apart. It had been at a dinner party like so many others that the Morgan family hosted. Politicians, businessmen, judges, all seated around the long mahogany table, served by staff in impeccable uniforms. Eleanor was there, wearing that same brooch, smiling politely as she chatted with the wife of a senator. And then the news arrived. A messenger delivered an envelope to her father in the middle of dinner. William Morgan opened it, read it, and his face turned grey. He rose from the table without a word and went to his office. The guests fell into an awkward silence. Eleanor remembered the look of pity and a certain satisfaction on the faces of some of those people, as if they were watching a downfall they had been expecting. In the following days, the friends began to disappear. The invitation letters stopped arriving. The visits dried up. When Eleanor walked down the street, women who had previously greeted her crossed to the other side. Men who had asked for her hand in marriage vanished like smoke. Eleanor learned during those bitter days a truth that no one teaches in etiquette classes. High society has no loyalty. It only has convenience, and when you cease to be useful, you become invisible. But now, holding that brooch, Eleanor felt something different. She was no longer the frightened girl who had fled Boston. She was no longer the young woman who wept over her father's body. She had crossed the entire country, survived misery, endured humiliation, worked until her bones ached. And on that journey, she had discovered something about herself. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. Eleanor pinned the brooch to her navy blue dress right over her heart. It wasn't ostentatious. It was too small to draw attention at first glance. But to anyone who knew East Coast high society, anyone who had moved in the same circles as the Morgan family, that brooch said it all. She looked at the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. The woman looking back still had calloused hands, dull hair, and dark circles of exhaustion under her eyes. But now he had something more. He had purpose. He had a hidden truth that was about to come to light. Charles Thornton wanted to humiliate the maid. He wanted to make the town laugh at a poor woman trying to pass herself off as a lady. He wanted to teach her her place. But the woman who was about to walk through that door wasn't the saloon maid. It was Eleanor Catherine Morgan, daughter of William Morgan, granddaughter of Jonathan Morgan, a descendant of one of Massachusetts' oldest families, a woman who had dined with governors, danced at balls where the tickets cost more than Thornton earned in a month early in his life. And by the time Thornton realized this, if he ever did, it would be too late. Eleanor stood before the mirror for a long moment, the brooch gleaming discreetly on her navy blue dress. The decision was made. She wasn't going to enter that ranch as a shamed servant, stumbling over her words and apologizing for existing. She was going to enter as Eleanor Morgan, with the poise, elegance, and confidence of someone who had once belonged to that world. But then, reality hit like a punch to the gut. She looked at the dress she had spent the entire afternoon trying to mend. It was simple, faded, clearly the work of someone who couldn't afford anything better. The fabric was thin from wear. The blue color had turned almost gray in places. There was no lace, no embroidery, nothing that resembled the silk dresses she wore in Boston. And worse, there was neither the time nor the money to get something better. The party was tomorrow night. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, anxiety rising in her chest like cold water. She might have all the poise in the world, all the education, all the memories of who she had been. But if she showed up in that simple dress, everyone would see exactly what Thornton wanted them to see, a poor maid trying to pass herself off as something she no longer was. Fear began to creep in. What if she failed? What if everyone laughed? What if Thornton exposed her in front of everyone, shouting that she was a fraud, a liar, a nobody pretending to be somebody? She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. No. She had survived worse things than the opinions of strangers. She had survived her father's death, her mother's madness, the loss of everything. She had crossed the country alone, endured daily humiliations in the saloon, maintained her dignity even when everything conspired to crush her. But dignity couldn't buy fabric. Eleanor opened her eyes and looked around the wretched little room. There was nothing of value, nothing she could sell. The brooch was the only thing, but she would never part with it. It was the last physical reminder of her family, the last connection to who she had been. Then an idea emerged. Risky, vulnerable, but perhaps the only way out. There was a seamstress in town, a woman called Mrs. Abernathy, who had a small shop near the church. Eleanor had passed by the window a few times, looking at the dresses on display. Nothing too luxurious, but well made, suitable for the wives of the local merchants and farmers. Mrs. Abernathy was known for being fair, but also for not giving credit. Cash in hand or nothing done. Eleanor checked her belongings. She had exactly $3.20, 2 weeks' wages at the saloon. It was all she had in the world. It wasn't nearly enough for a new dress, but perhaps that would be enough to rent one. She stood up, grabbed the money, and left the small room. The sun was already setting, tinging the Arizona sky orange and red. The streets of Silver Ridge were relatively empty. Most people had already gone home or were in the saloons starting their evening. Eleanor walked quickly to Mrs. Abernathy's shop. The sign on the door said closed, but there was a light inside. Eleanor knocked. Once, twice, nothing. She knocked again, harder. The door opened. Mrs. Abernathy was a woman in her 60s, with grey hair tied in a bun and round glasses perched on her nose. She looked Eleanor up and down with a neutral expression. "We're closed," she said, already starting to close the door. "Please," Eleanor said, her voice sounding more desperate than intended. "I need a dress. For tomorrow night." Mrs. Abernathy stopped, curious. "A dress? What for?" "For a party at the Thornton Ranch." The seamstress raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You? At the Thornton Ranch?" There was skepticism in her voice, but also something else. Pity, perhaps. Eleanor swallowed her pride. "I know I don't have the money to buy it, but can I rent it? I'll pay what I have, and return the dress the next day." "Impeccable." Mrs. Abernathy crossed her arms, thoughtful. "How much do you have?" $3.20. The woman let out a long sigh. "Girl, a decent dress costs 10 times that." Eleanor felt her heart sink, but she wasn't going to give up. Not now. "I know, but please, it's important." Mrs. Abernathy looked at her for a long moment, and then something changed in her expression, as if she had seen something she recognized. "Come in," she said, opening the door. Eleanor entered the shop, her heart pounding. The scent of new fabric and lavender filled the small but tidy space. There were mannequins with half-worn dresses, stacks of fabric, and an old sewing machine in the corner. Mrs. Abernathy closed the door behind them and lit another lamp. "Sit there," she said, pointing to a chair near the window. Eleanor obeyed, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The seamstress stood still for a moment, studying Eleanor with those attentive eyes behind her round glasses. Then she asked directly, "Why did Thornton invite you to his party?" Eleanor hesitated, but there was something in Mrs. Abernathy's voice. It wasn't judgment, it was genuine curiosity mixed with concern. So she decided to tell the truth, or part of it. "He wants to humiliate me. He wants me to show up there and be the butt of jokes for his guests." Mrs. Abernathy nodded slowly, as if she already knew. "And you're going anyway?" "I go." "Why?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Because he destroyed my family, and I spent 6 months in this city waiting for an opportunity to get close to him. Now he's opened the door. I'm not going to waste it." The seamstress remained silent, processing. Then she went to a cupboard in the back of the shop and began pulling out drawers, rummaging through boxes. "You're not from around here, are you? You're not from the West?" "No, I'm from Boston," I thought. "You carry this in your posture, even when you try to hide it." Mrs. Abernathy pulled a large box and placed it on her desk. "My husband was a merchant. We lived in San Francisco before coming here. He died 5 years ago. Thornton wanted to buy the land where our house is located for a ridiculously low price. When my husband refused, Thornton made sure to destroy his business. He succeeded. My husband died in debt, and I had to sell everything and come to this forgotten town to try to start over." Eleanor felt a tightness in her chest. Another victim of Thornton, another life destroyed by his greed. Mrs. Abernathy opened the box and took out a dress. It was dark green velvet, with long sleeves and a high collar, decorated with small mother-of-pearl buttons. Simple but elegant, the kind of dress a high society lady would wear to a formal dinner in the West, neither too ostentatious nor too simple. "That was mine," she said, holding the dress up to the light, "from the time when I still had reason to wear dresses like this." Eleanor stood there, speechless. I can't accept this. You don't even know me." "But I know Thornton." Mrs. Abernathy held out the dress to Eleanor. "And I know what it's like to be trampled on by powerful men who think they can do whatever they want just because they have money." Eleanor picked up the dress with trembling hands. The fabric was soft, heavy, well cared for. She felt tears burning in her eyes. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your kindness." "Girl," Mrs. Abernathy said, her voice growing softer, "no one can take your dignity away from you. They can take your money, your house, your family. They can humiliate you, make you work until you're bone dry. But dignity, it lives inside." She patted her chest lightly. "And no one can take it away." Eleanor let the tears fall. For the first time in months, they weren't tears of anger or pain. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of silent redemption. Mrs. Abernathy didn't wait for an answer. She went to another drawer and took out a pair of white lace gloves, a tortoise-shell hair comb, and a simple necklace of faux pearls that imitated real ones well. "Take it all. Return it when you can. Or don't return it. It doesn't matter." Eleanor clutched the items to her chest, unable to speak. Mrs. Abernathy placed her hand on her shoulder. Now go. Tomorrow night, you walk into that ranch with your head held high. And remember, you once were what they're pretending to be. When Eleanor left the store, night had already fallen completely over Silver Ridge, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something other than anger. She felt strength, she felt purpose, and she felt that, perhaps, she wasn't as alone as she thought. Write this down. Has there ever been someone who believed in you when no one else did? Saturday dawned with a clear blue sky over Silver Ridge. Eleanor woke before sunrise as usual, but this time she didn't go to work at the saloon. She had asked for the day off, something Butch granted with a disdainful look, as if he already knew what was going to happen that night and wanted to watch from afar. Eleanor spent the entire morning preparing herself. First, she filled the basin with water that she heated on the wood-burning stove in the back of the saloon. She washed her hair with soda soap, scrubbing until she removed the smell of alcohol and smoke that had permeated her strands. Then she washed her entire body, scrubbing her skin until it was red, as if she could wash away all the filth of those 6 months of humiliation. She dried herself slowly, looking at her own hands, calloused, rough, with small cuts on her fingers. A maid's hands, but also hands that had played the piano, held lace fans, signed invitations written in perfect calligraphy. She rubbed rose oil, the last bit that remained in an old bottle, on her hands and arms, trying to soften the roughness. Then came the hair. Eleanor combed it strand by strand, undoing the knots, smoothing it carefully. She pinned it up in a low, elegant bun, the way she had learned from the French governess years ago. She used the tortoise-shell comb that Mrs. Abernathy had lent her, fixing each strand in place. The result wasn't perfect, it lacked shine, it lacked volume, but it was decent. And then came the dress. Eleanor took it from the trunk where she had kept it so carefully. The dark green velvet fell over her body like a second skin, fitting perfectly at the waist, shoulders, and length. She buttoned the small mother-of-pearl buttons one by one, feeling the transformation happen. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor. He put on the white lace gloves, the faux pearl necklace, and the Morgan family brooch right over his heart. He looked at himself in the cracked mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the saloon waitress. It was Eleanor Catherine Morgan, back from the dead. Meanwhile, across town at the Thornton Ranch, the feast was being prepared. Long tables draped with white tablecloths, varnished wooden chairs brought from the church, oil lamps illuminating the grand hall. Expensive food being prepared in the kitchen, roast turkey, scalloped potatoes, apple pies, imported whiskey on the shelves, everything perfect, everything calculated. Charles Thornton was in the office, wearing his best suit, smoking a Cuban cigar. He called Frank Sullivan and gave him the final instructions. When she arrives, you bring her into the dining room. I'll greet her politely in front of everyone. I'll introduce her as our special guest, and then, in the middle of dinner, I'll ask her to serve the table. He smiled, the cigar dangling from the corner of his mouth. I want to see everyone laughing. I want her to feel the weight of every gaze. Frank nodded. What if she refuses? Then, I humiliate her in another way. I ask if she doesn't know how to serve, if she's forgotten how. I make jokes, everyone will understand. Thornton took a long drag. One way or another, she'll leave here destroyed. Back in the saloon's small room, Eleanor stood before the mirror for the last time. Her heart pounded fast, almost painfully. She felt fear rising in her throat, fear of failing, of being exposed, of becoming a laughingstock, of losing control and collapsing in front of everyone. But along with the fear, there was something else. Courage born of pain, determination forged in loss. A deep certainty that this night wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving to herself that nothing Thornton had taken from her could erase who she truly was. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself the words Mrs. Abernathy had said, "No one can take your dignity away." Outside, Thornton's carriage was already waiting. The coachman knocked on the door. It was time. Eleanor took one last thing from the trunk, the envelope with the documents, the evidence against Thornton. She tucked it inside the bodice of her dress, close to her chest. She wasn't going to wear them today, but knowing they were there gave her strength. She opened the door and went out. When the door of that carriage opened at the Thornton Ranch, it would either rise from the ashes or die inside for good. The carriage stopped in front of the Thornton Ranch. Eleanor could hear the music coming from inside, a piano playing a lively waltz, voices laughing, the clinking of glasses. The yellow light from the lanterns filtered through the large windows, illuminating the Arizona night. The coachman opened the door and extended his hand. Eleanor took a deep breath, took his hand and got down. Her feet touched the hard-packed earth. For a second she hesitated. She could go back. She could climb back into the carriage and disappear. But then she remembered her dying father's face, her mother screaming in the sanatorium, every humiliation she had swallowed in those 6 months. She lifted her chin and walked towards the entrance. Frank Sullivan was waiting in the double-carved wooden doorway. He looked Eleanor up and down, surprised. The dark green dress made her look different. She was no longer the dull saloon maid. There was something in her posture, in the way she carried herself, that made him hesitate for a moment. "Miss Morgan," he said, opening the door. "Mr. Thornton is expecting." Eleanor nodded and went inside. The ranch's main hall was enormous. An iron chandelier hung from the high ceiling with dozens of lit candles. Tables were covered with white tablecloths, porcelain plates, silver cutlery. About 50 people, men in suits, women in elaborate dresses, all from the elite of Silver Ridge and neighboring towns. Wealthy merchants, ranchers with vast estates, Judge Parker, the sheriff, even the church priest was there, and in the corner, a man was playing the piano. A cheerful waltz filled the room. Eleanor stopped at the entrance. Frank announced loudly, "Miss Eleanor Morgan." The piano stopped. Abruptly, the conversations died down. All heads turned, and Eleanor felt the impact of 200 eyes fixed on her. She almost tripped. She almost let fear win. She could feel the shame rising up her neck, hot and suffocating. She could imagine what everyone was thinking. Who is this? The saloon maid? How dare she? But then, something happened. Eleanor remembered who she was, not who she had become, but who she had always been. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and began to walk. Not too fast, not too slow, with the precise cadence she had learned years ago when she descended the stairs of the Morgan mansion while guests waited in the drawing room. Each step measured, each movement controlled. The velvet dress brushed against the floor with a soft sound. The white gloves lightly held up the skirt. The necklace of faux pearls shimmered in the candlelight, and she was looking straight ahead. Not down, not to the sides, straight ahead. Charles Thornton stood by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in his hand. When he saw Eleanor enter, he smiled, that cruel smile he had planned to use to humiliate her. But something in that smile faltered, because the woman entering didn't look like a frightened maid. She looked like something else. Eleanor walked across the entire hall. The silence was absolute. Even the fire in the fireplace seemed to have stopped crackling. She could feel every gaze, every judgment, every stifled whisper. But she didn't stop. She didn't tremble. And then in the midst of that silence, a female voice whispered from the corner of the room. An elderly woman sitting near the window with white hair and a blue silk dress. "My God, it's her. It's Eleanor Morgan." The name echoed through the hall like distant thunder, and everything changed. The elderly woman who had whispered the name rose from her chair, her hand trembling as she pointed to Eleanor. "Eleanor Morgan, daughter of William Morgan of Boston." Her voice was thick with disbelief. "I saw her at a ball in San Francisco about 7 or 8 years ago. She danced with the governor." The murmur started low but grew quickly. Like wildfire, the revelation spread through the hall. "Morgan, the railroad transportation family? I thought they had gone bankrupt. Wait, she's that girl? The heiress? What is she doing here?" A portly Sacramento banker who was near the dining table put down his glass of wine and took a few steps toward Eleanor, his eyes wide. "My God, it's true. I knew your father. William Morgan was one of the most honest men I've ever done business with." He looked around, confused. "But why are you here? In Silver Ridge? Working as—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Eleanor maintained an upright posture, her face calm, but inside her heart was racing. She hadn't expected to be recognized. Not so quickly, not by so many people. This changed everything, for better and for worse, because now there was no more pretending, no more hiding. She was exposed, and Charles Thornton stood there a few feet from her, the glass of whiskey still in his hand, the cruel smile frozen on his face. He looked at Eleanor, then at the guests, then back at her. And for the first time since Eleanor had known him, she saw something in his face that she had never seen before. Fear. Because Thornton knew exactly who William Morgan was. He knew what he had done to his family. He knew he had forged documents, bribed officials, destroyed the reputation of an innocent man to steal contracts and expand his empire. And now that man's daughter, the living witness to his cruelty, was standing there in the middle of his drawing room, in front of all the people he wanted to impress. Judge Parker, a man with a gray beard and a stern expression, stepped forward. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice deep and respectful, "it is an honor to have you here. Your father was one of the most upright men I have ever known. A great loss for us all." Eleanor inclined her head slightly, thanking him. "Thank you, Judge Parker. My father always spoke of men like you with great respect." Her voice was firm, polite, perfectly controlled, but inside she struggled not to break down, to keep the tears from falling, to keep from screaming everything she wanted to scream, that the man who had invited them to that party was responsible for her father's death, for her mother's madness, for the destruction of everything. But it wasn't time. Not yet. Thornton finally regained his composure, or tried to. He forced a smile, placed his glass on the table, and walked toward Eleanor, his hands open in a falsely welcoming gesture. "Miss Morgan," he said, his voice a little too hoarse, a little too loud. "What a wonderful surprise. I didn't know that you were in Silver Ridge. If I had known, I would have—" He hesitated, searching for words. "I would have offered my help much sooner." Eleanor looked directly into his eyes, and for the first time in 6 months, she didn't look away. She didn't lower her head. She didn't pretend to be invisible. "How kind of you, Mr. Thornton," she replied, her voice soft but sharp as glass. "But I manage very well on my own." The silence in the hall was deafening. People sensed that something was happening there, something beyond a simple social gathering. There was a tension in the air, an invisible electric current between Eleanor and Thornton, and the tycoon, for the first time in his life, didn't know what to do. Thornton felt control slipping from his fingers. The people around him looked at Eleanor with respect, curiosity, even admiration. This was not what he had planned. He had brought her there to be the butt of jokes, not to be recognized as someone important. He needed to reverse that. Fast. Well, Thornton said loudly, forcing a laugh that sounded fake and nervous. "What an interesting story. But let's be honest here." He looked around, searching for allies in the faces of the guests. "This woman may have a fancy name, but do you know where I found her? Washing glasses at the Silver Star Saloon." Some people exchanged uncomfortable glances. Eleanor felt the blow, direct, cruel, calculated to sow doubt. Thornton continued, gaining confidence. "She says she's Eleanor Morgan, daughter of William Morgan, but anyone can say that, can't they? Anyone can use a bankrupt family name and pretend to be someone they're not." He pointed at her, his voice growing louder. "That woman is an imposter, an opportunist who saw a chance to infiltrate among respectable people and decided to take advantage of it." The murmur returned, but now it had a different tone. Doubt, uncertainty. Some women moved slightly away from Eleanor. The banker who had praised her father frowned, confused. Eleanor felt the ground open up beneath her feet. Thornton was doing exactly what he did best, manipulating, lying, twisting the narrative. And it was working. People were starting to question, to doubt, to look at her as if she were a complete fraud. "I have witnesses," Thornton continued, pointing to Frank Sullivan, who was standing near the door. "Frank, tell them, where does this woman work?" Frank hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but obeyed. "In the saloon, sir. She washes glasses and serves drinks." Thornton opened his arms triumphantly. "See? She's just a maid who decided to dress up and pretend to be someone important. And you were here, treating her like royalty." He looked directly at Eleanor, his eyes cold and victorious. "I think you'd better leave before I call the sheriff and charge you with fraud and theft, because I bet that dress isn't yours, is it?" Eleanor felt the humiliation burning her cheeks. Fear rose in her throat. Fear of being expelled, of being arrested, of losing everything again. People looked at her, waiting for an answer, waiting for her to confess, waiting for her to fall apart. But then, something happened. Eleanor remembered Mrs. Abernathy's words, "No one can take your dignity away." She remembered her father, her mother, everything she had lost, and she remembered that she hadn't crossed the entire country, endured 6 months of humiliation, and planned every detail only to give up now. She slipped her hand into the bodice of her dress, where she had kept the envelope with the documents. She slowly and carefully pulled it out and held it at chest level. The room fell into absolute silence. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Thornton," Eleanor said, her voice calm but carrying a strength no one expected. "I work at the saloon. I wash glasses, I serve drinks, and I do it because you destroyed my family and left me with nothing." She opened the envelope. "And I have the proof." Eleanor took a yellowed photograph from the envelope and held it up for everyone to see. "This is me, at 17, in front of the Morgan family mansion in Boston. Next to me, my father, William Morgan." Her voice didn't tremble. A man whom Mr. Thornton destroyed with forged documents, bribes, and lies. She handed the photograph to Judge Parker, who was closest. He held it up to the light, studying it carefully. His expression changed, from skepticism to shock. "It's her," the judge confirmed, looking at the other guests. "I recognize the Morgan mansion. I was there once years ago for a charity dinner." Eleanor pulled another document from the envelope. "Here is a letter from the Morgan family lawyer, detailing how Charles Thornton forged contracts to make it appear that my father was embezzling government funds." She looked directly at Thornton, who had turned pale. "He bribed inspectors. He paid journalists to publish lies, all to steal railroad contracts that rightfully belonged to my family." The Sacramento banker took the letter from the judge's hands and began to read aloud. His voice echoed through the room, each word falling like a stone. Names of bribed officials, amounts paid, dates, signatures. People began to move away from Thornton, literally. They took steps backward, creating an empty circle around him. The tycoon stood alone in the center of the room, his face red, his hands trembling. That's a lie," he shouted, his voice hoarse and desperate. "She forged those documents. She's trying to destroy me." "Mr. Thornton," Judge Parker said, his voice cold and authoritative, "I know the handwriting of some of these men mentioned here. I recognize these signatures. This is not forgery." The sheriff, a tall man with a gray mustache, stepped forward. "Mr. Thornton, I'll need you to come with me to answer a few questions." Thornton looked around, searching for allies, searching for someone to defend him. But all the faces that had once flattered him, laughed at his jokes, accepted his bribes, were now turned away. Cold, judging. He had spent years building that empire of fear and power, and in a single night, a woman he had tried to humiliate had brought it all down. Eleanor continued, her voice firm. "My father died of heartbreak. My mother went insane and has been in a sanatorium ever since. I lost everything. Home, family, future. And I came to the West because it was the only place where I could start over without anyone knowing me." She paused. "But I never forgot, and I never stopped gathering evidence." Frank Sullivan, who was near the door, lowered his head in shame. Some women discreetly wiped away tears. The priest made the sign of the cross, and Thornton, the most powerful man in Silver Ridge, the tycoon who decided who ate and who went hungry, stood there, broken before everyone. The humiliation had shifted sides, but Eleanor felt no joy. She felt only a profound weariness. Justice did not bring back the dead. It did not heal wounds. It only closed cycles. She always knew, someone whispered from the back of the room, and she waited for the right moment. The sheriff took a step toward Thornton, but Eleanor raised her hand. "Wait." Everyone stopped, surprised. Thornton looked at her, his eyes wide, half hope, half terror. Perhaps she would feel pity. Perhaps she would forgive. But Eleanor wasn't interested in either of those things. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice calm but laden with an authority that silenced the entire room. "You destroyed my family because you thought power and money placed you above any consequences. You thought you could crush whomever you wanted, whenever you wanted, without ever paying for it." She took a step toward him. Thornton stepped back. "But today you learned something important. Dignity cannot be bought. Honor cannot be stolen. And the truth, however long it takes, always finds its way." Eleanor turned to Judge Parker. "These documents prove fraud, corruption, and the deliberate destruction of a legitimate company. My lawyer in Boston is ready to take this to federal court. Mr. Thornton will answer for everything he has done, not only to my family, but to all the other people he has destroyed over the years." The judge nodded gravely. "I'll make sure that happens, Miss Morgan." Thornton opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He was completely defeated, and the most painful thing for a man like him wasn't the prison, wasn't the trials. It was seeing his reputation crumble before the very people he had manipulated for years. Eleanor then did something no one expected. She turned to Mrs. Abernathy, who was in the corner of the hall, watching everything with tears in her eyes, and walked over to her. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, taking off her dark green dress and gloves. "For the dress, for the confidence, for reminding me who I am." Mrs. Abernathy held Eleanor's hands tightly. "You always knew who you were, girl. You just needed to remember." Eleanor looked around the hall one last time. All those rich, powerful, important people. She could stay there, rebuild her name, accept the offers of help that were already beginning to appear. The Sacramento banker had already mentioned opportunities. Judge Parker spoke of restitution, but Eleanor didn't want any of that. "I'm leaving Silver Ridge," she announced, her voice firm. "Not to run away, but because I choose to. I'm going to San Francisco, where I have contacts who still remember my father. I'm going to rebuild, not the fortune, but a life. An honest, dignified life. My own." She paused, looking directly at Thornton one last time. "And you will stay here, facing the consequences of every lie, every betrayal, every life you destroyed, not for revenge, for justice." The sheriff led Thornton outside. The tycoon walked out dejected, dragging his feet, a broken man, and no one lifted a finger to defend him. Eleanor left the ranch that night, but not alone. Mrs. Abernathy decided to go with her. After all, what was keeping her at Silver Ridge? They took the stagecoach the next day, taking only the essentials. Eleanor wore the Morgan family brooch on her chest, the documents that had freed her, and something more important, the certainty that she had honored her father's memory. 3 months later, letters arrived from San Francisco. Eleanor had gotten a job as a clerk in a law office. Nothing glamorous, but honest. Mrs. Abernathy opened a small sewing shop, and together, 2 women whom the West had tried to crush rebuilt something that no one could take away: dignity. In Silver Ridge, Thornton's empire crumbled. Federal lawsuits, prison, bankruptcy, and the town learned a lesson the Old West rarely taught. Money buys silence, land, even judges, but it doesn't buy honor. And honor, in the end, is the only thing that survives when everything else turns to dust. If you've made it this far, it's because this story touched something real within you. Perhaps you too have experienced moments when everything seemed lost. Or you know someone who fought against injustice and stood firm, even when everyone predicted their downfall. Stories like Eleanor's exist to remind us that dignity is non-negotiable. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Every week I bring you stories like this that touch the heart and make us think about courage, justice, and new beginnings. Leave a like on this video if you felt it was worth every minute. And comment, "Honor can't be bought." That way I know you stayed with me until the end and understood the message. And look, there's another video over here about a woman who lost everything but rebuilt her life in a way no one expected. Click and continue watching over there. You won't regret it. Thank you for being here. Until the next story.